Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 2022 Digital Trust Summit. We have an amazing day set up for you. Some really incredible voices are going to come join us, and I'm really both honored and incredibly enthusiastic about the stuff that we're going to be doing today. It will be so much fun. If I could ask my team to forward the slides for me, we'll just get started. And meanwhile, as I'm kind of opening this up, feel free to share in the chat where you're from, what time zone you're in. I'm really thrilled that we've got folks from all over the world that are joining us this morning. Oh, and you're in Joburg. Very cool. Joburg's the city where I discovered I absolutely love jacaranda trees. It is a beautiful, beautiful place. Welcome. Here's the journey we're going to go on today and take you through a very quick roll through what you're going to see today. This morning, I'm opening up. I hope you all have your morning beverage of choice to join us. In about a half hour, we're going to join some colleagues of ours from Waymo. If you live here in the Phoenix Valley, you've seen the Waymo vehicles touring around the city. Autonomous vehicles are incredibly exciting, but also come with them all sorts of interesting challenges for us. So it's going to be wonderful to hear Stacy and Gabe talk to us from Waymo about the kinds of things that they're considering and their approaches there. From there, we're going to roll into a lovely panel about consent and sensibility. What did we just sign? When you click that terms of service, what's that actually mean? It'll be a fun discussion. From there, we're going to have Deborah Watson, who comes to us from one of our sponsors from Proofpoint, who'll talk to us about insider threats. As you guys may know, October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and so it's an important discussion that we'll be having as part of our day. We'll kind of weave in discussions around cybersecurity as well. Right at 11:45, we're going to be joined by Shailesh Shankar. She's just amazing, and she and I are going to have a great conversation, really a blue sky chat, but it'll be part of an anchor for one of today's themes around the digital poverty line, and how cybersecurity is really impacting the haves and have-nots in our world. We'll roll from there into a discussion around that. You'll get to hear from some voices here in the state of Arizona that are really trying to address those needs in really acute, but also very creative ways. We'll roll from there and take a bit of an academic shift and move into a discussion about open science and open source. So as we try to open up the environments that we're in, both technically and in terms of who we're engaging across our communities, some really interesting themes emerge around transparency that have some really interesting repercussions for trust and privacy. So that'll kind of lead us into the early afternoon. From there, another one of our sponsors, CrowdStrike, will have a colleague joining us. I actually saw Jason here earlier, so hello, Jason, if you've already joined us. That's going to be a wonderful tour of CrowdStrike and a really wonderful discussion about the road of equity, and then I will close us all out. So let's leave this slide. We'll kind of roll into, you're going to have to forgive me, I'm going to have all sorts of puns today, but we'll roll right into our next discussion. Next, please. I've mentioned both CrowdStrike and Proofpoint. Like many of these kinds of events, partnerships like this with ASU are not just really good in terms of protecting the communities that we have, but it's lovely to be able to partner with them to create content and to create opportunities to have discussions like this. So I'm so grateful to both of them for being here and being sponsors. Next, please. Hey, this is me. I'm Donna. Just a little bit about me for those of you that haven't met me. I am the Chief Information Security and Digital Trust Officer here at Arizona State University. My role is really to help us with strategic thinking and alignment across the enterprise that is ASU. So everything from the roughly 140,000 students to the amazing research that happens on campus. We have quite a number of HIPAA-covered entities that are doing health-related things. If you look across the entire span of the university, my role is to really help align us and to protect the enterprise and all the different things that we do. I have an amazing team, some of whom are with us today, and we might hear some questions and be able to talk to them throughout the day. And that team really is just endless and incredibly dedicated, whether it's privacy, incident response, our engineering teams thinking about cloud security. It's really pretty exciting. So I'm very honored to get a chance to work with such incredible people. I myself didn't start in a technology career per se, and a lot of what you're going to hear today are the future of cybersecurity careers and what's really available to us. You might have in mind that it's hackers sitting at keyboards and whatever your stereotype might be of a technologist. But many of the folks on my team will tell you the world is actually wilder and much more wonderful. Myself have a history degree, started a company when I was in college in the early 90s, and then never left and kind of stayed through the entire time and on the journey today. So you're going to get to hear from some really interesting folks today that have had their own journeys, and we'll kind of share with you. And hopefully, if you've got any questions about how we've done it, put it in the Q&A and we can answer those questions along the way. And I'm very committed to learning from this incredible diversity of thought leaders and folks doing amazing work across the globe, and then taking those wonderful lessons and then figuring out how do you adapt them locally? How can you take a model that you've seen, say in Joburg, and then bring it here where we can actually adapt it to the kinds of situations that we're seeing. And along the way, finding incredible folks who are very passionate about the work they're doing and doing everything we can to lift up their voices. So that's me. Let's go to the next slide. Would be remiss of me not to ground us a little bit in the charter of Arizona State University. Some of you may have seen this. If not, allow me to introduce you to the charter. You know, a really important thing about us being a public research institution is that we think at the end of the day, what really matters to us is not who we exclude, but who we include and how they succeed. And that's very deeply, we have entire teams deeply embedded towards ensuring that we are really living that mission. When we do that, it creates all sorts of interesting opportunities, things like astronomy and physics degrees online available to students in rural areas that might not have access to a tier 1 institution like ourselves, opportunities to get deeply embedded with, say, libraries and community colleges across the state to do really interesting work in, say, digital equity. We've got lots of efforts in that. So it's really wonderful to just ideate and then see the ways you can engage in that work. We are, of course, a research institution, advancing that research and the discovery and ensuring that what we're doing has public value. That's very important to us. And we see ourselves as having a fundamental responsibility to the communities that we serve, which hopefully you'll see as a thread in everything we talk about today. Next, please. All right, so I mentioned earlier that I started a company in the 90s. That company was with some fantastic colleagues of mine, a fellow who's still a good friend of mine, Paco Nathan, and a few other friends. And it was really focused around fertility software, which frankly, in the early 90s, pre-web, was a pretty audacious thing for us to try to do. But as you can see today, and you may have seen on television, I actually saw the Apple commercial for the new Apple Watch about a month ago in one of the first NFL games of the season. And during that commercial, just in passing, not even 2 seconds of the commercial, was this lovely little spot where they stopped and showed a woman checking her watch and seeing ovulation data. I think it's extraordinary to think through where our technology has brought us and what kind of data that then leaves us with. The number of connected wearable devices, you can see that here, has more than doubled in the space of 3 years. And that is just going to increase in extraordinary ways. But with all of those wonderful devices, and we'll hear from Waymo, who's also going to talk about some wondrous work that they're doing, it's just absolutely incredible to stop and think, where am I leaving a digital footprint? Where are the kinds of things that I'm doing day to day in my own activities? How is that technology serving me? How am I then part of an ecosystem of how we think about technology? How does that technology then give us opportunities to serve the communities that we're in? It's a very, very interesting time. And the notion of the quantified self and thinking about where we are today is really going to be a theme that you'll see throughout the rest of the day. Next slide, please. Now, some of these ideas have been around for a while, and if you're not familiar with the incredible Ali Sheedy and Matthew Broderick and the 1983 War Games, allow me, and if you would spend a minute and a half or so with me to enjoy a little bit of a throwback. Cue the video.
You're really into computers, huh?
Yeah. Dialing into the school's computer. They change the password every couple of weeks, but I know where they write it down.
Are those your grades?
Yeah. I don't think that I deserved an F. Do you?
You can't do that.
Already done. Do you have a middle initial?
K, Catherine. These are my grades.
How can anybody get a D in home ec?
If that's none of your business, can you erase this,
No,
please?
it's too late.
What are you doing?
I'm changing your biology grade.
No, I don't want you to do that. You're gonna get me in trouble.
No, nobody can find out. There, you just got a C. Now you don't have to go to summer school.
Change it back.
Why? They can't possibly
I said change it back.
Okay, okay.
I guess I better get going.
So a quick nod in the chat. How many of us have actually seen War Games and remember that scene? A handful. Yeah, there are a couple things I love about that. In part, like thinking about our phones and just how far the notion of a phone has come. Certainly, that and friends of mine that actually had the phone modems. I was a little young to have one. My first modem was a 9600 baud modem and didn't require that I put in a phone, but I did get a dedicated phone line for it. I remember being, pretty astonished that you could take the phone off and put it in this little cradle and then have access to information. That seemed like an extraordinary thing. Little did we know what Apple and Google and Android and others, Samsung would have in store with us in the future. So I love that kind of view into a little bit of the tech that they had in the early 80s. I also love that, David Lightman is this like incredibly innocent guy, but then it's Ali Sheedy's character that kind of comes in and says, well, wait a second, is this a good idea? And frankly, that we're actually seeing in that, at least one of the first instances that I saw of schools and education being the target of hackers. And it turns out we are often the target of hackers. I'm going to pull back a little bit and let's just look at how much of that kind of activity is happening and what that means for us. You might have seen, and of course, Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So hopefully this month you're getting more articles and more things on your social feeds about these issues. But right now, an institution that's actually attacked with a ransomware attack is looking at about 4.5 million. And of course, there are lots of different things that go into what exactly it costs if you get attacked. But it is not trivial. And certainly if you're a school, this is well outside of the means of what most of our higher ed institutions would be able to handle or bear. So what do you do? How do we think about some of the folks in our society that are very much in this world of being threatened by this kind of activity? The data that you have, the data that we have in institution, to remediate that data, to actually be able to get it back in any kind of protective way. Research right now shows that that's about $168 per record. And imagine all the records that are out there, all the different systems that your data is actually housed in, whether that's Salesforce that allows us to send you very targeted and hopefully very relevant messages about the university and what we have to offer you. Or maybe you've actually uploaded vaccine records, of course, your transcript data. We have a tremendous amount of information about our students just in universities alone. And then, of course, every company that you deal with has got their own systems that also have that data in them. At the end of the day, what research right now is showing us, and Verizon, IBM, there are a number of different of the big companies that are pretty diligent about trying to report out on the state of the industry. Gartner, they are telling us that about 19% of breaches are actually through stolen credentials. So little bit of a joke that Matthew makes about knowing where the school administrators write down the password, even though they change it every couple weeks. I don't know how much the world has really changed. So allow me to put in a plug for multi-factor. If ourselves here, if you're at ASU, we're using Duo. If your bank, if your favorite concert hall asks you if you want to do a two-factor, say yes and absolutely opt in, because it's the single greatest thing that you can do, not an impossible thing to hack. If somebody asks you to like click on that two-factor and it wasn't you that prompted it, don't say yes. But if one of your trusted partners and folks that you're doing business with asks you to engage, by all means opt in. The second thing really is phishing. Incredible emails that you get that are getting savvier and savvier. Today, we actually see emails that come in from stolen credentials at other universities that then target our community. So as a student, if you see an email that's offering you a job and you don't know who that's from, we've actually got infosec@asu.edu. You can email it to us. Students from other institutions, find out who at your institution you should share this with. My teams, and I think Rio Salato's here, you know, we often work with other institutions to try to catch these instances and squash them where we can. But by all means, watch out for those kinds of things, because they're actually very serious and pretty much the cause of how most of us get into trouble. Let's go to the next slide. And we'll kind of go from, you know, maybe Matthew Broderick being an innovator in the space of hacking into school systems, but he's not alone. This is the data that we just pulled earlier this week that's happening, and Microsoft makes these lovely dashboards publicly available. You can see there the education as one of the industries that's commonly gone after. Certainly retail, you see phishing attempts with all sorts of online retailers, healthcare, no surprises there. But just seeing how big the bar is in education is a little bit of a shattering moment for many of us, and has really led to a lot of the kinds of conversations that you'll see that we're actively having today about how to really protect those of us that are in the education sphere. With 80% of the malware encounters being in education alone, you can kind of see the magnitude of the challenge that we have. Again, I'm going to offer, if you have any questions on the things that I'm presenting, there's a Q&A, pop them over there, and over the course of the day, we'll answer them. Let's go to the next one. So where does all this bring us? From the incredible data that's surrounding us with multiple devices that we're bringing to bear, the sophistication of universities doing more and more with third-party vendors, doing more and more with cloud providers, and not just universities, like small businesses are doing the same. How can we each think about either our, I don't know, small businesses that you might be running alongside the work that you're doing, or the companies that you're working with, or here at ASU, how can we think about protection in kind of smarter and more modern ways? Here is our presentation, and I invite you to discuss with us your thoughts on this and how you're approaching it, because we are ever learning. We really start here with the notion of transparency and authenticity. I described a lot of the data that we have. Institutionally, there's a lot that we do to try to then bring that data into ways that help our students. Back to that, who we include and how they succeed, we're mobilizing as fast as we can possibly learn to be able to then use those insights and learnings to serve our students and our community. But there are a lot of things there that I think are worth a conversation and worth a dialogue. So there are efforts here at the university to really bring transparency, to really bring governance, to really bring an understanding inside of each of the units across all of our teams, and then efforts like the summit today to try to bring authentic conversations to the table. It's an important tenet of how we approach this. Our second one is privacy by design. And there's some pretty amazing folks, both in the enterprise technology office, there are kind of core groups of engineers and thought leaders in technology, but they are working alongside our colleagues that are in the provost's office, our colleagues that are in ASU Online, our colleagues in each of the units, to really think deeply about privacy and how we not have privacy merely as something that we're doing because they're compliance things, GDPR is asking us to, but how we're thinking about privacy in the systems that we build and the way that we deploy our technology. Privacy is an important component of it. Another piece of that is that at the underlying foundation of all that technology that we're rolling out, there are very intentional conversations about security. So it's not just a privacy team or a cybersecurity team that's really thinking deeply about this, but we've got folks that are actually embedded in other aspects of our technology, whether it's Google Cloud Marketing, shout out to Jonathan Carroll and Amanda Gully and all the amazing teams over at EdPlus, or our teams at UTO, all across the university. We've got colleagues really thinking about security at the core of what they're trying to implement. So if we've got things that are secure at their foundation, and then we're thinking about privacy in terms of interactions, we lead ourselves with a really nice balance. Now, underpinning all of that, and I'll kind of lead into our fourth tenet, is agency at the center. All of the data that we've talked about is data that's being created by the things that you are doing, by that moment that you hover, by that moment that you click on something, by the amount of time that you spent watching a War Games video. All those things leave this really powerful digital footprint. We're very interested in ways that we can bring you at the agency level where you actually can do something with that information. It's not just us learning ways that we can help you, but also ways that you can be your own charter of your stars and be able to do that in ways that then serve you as you move beyond the university. Let's go to the next slide. To do this, I wanted to speak a little bit, and maybe as a preface around cybersecurity careers and where all this is going, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about who is this community that's actually engaged. And let's kind of circle around a little bit. In the core there, you see our tenants, but orbiting those tenants are some really amazing individuals across the campus. So cybersecurity isn't something that a small team's engaged in. There are small teams that are engaged in it, but they're not alone. They're doing it in concert with some pretty incredible folk. So at the university level itself, and if you were thinking about kind of interested in these issues and I'd like to impact them, what are the kinds of things I could engage in? At every college, at the enterprise technology group, inside of all of our units is someone, or maybe a team, that's really dedicated towards the technology that they're creating. And in each of those roles, whether it's someone working in Salesforce, or it's somebody working on the web, or somebody working on faculty technology, all of those have moments where we get to say, hey, we're going to do something with this vendor. What data is passing back and forth? How can I think deeply about that? How could I engage with the teams on campus that are trying to make that better? So there's pieces of this work that just get spread across the entire campus. ASU PD, we do a tremendous amount of engagement with them. Security both includes the physical piece and the cyber piece. And more today, what's happening in the digital world has a real life impact on what's happening to you physically. So you may not think of that as a space, but it certainly is. OGC, that's our general counsel. We're going to hear from Gabe a little bit later today and get to talk about the world that he lives in. Another important piece are the folks that are helping us in terms of compliance and legal. Of course, our academics, we have folks across the campus that are doing important and incredible research in this space. Later today, you're going to hear from a nonprofit fellow from Mozilla who's doing incredible work. I don't know that Bobby's logged in late yet, but I can't wait to introduce you to her later. And then, of course, I think we've got a few folks on the call that are from federal and state, local agencies, cities, independent school districts, other folks that get involved in this world too. Go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, there we go. Wanted to give you a little bit of a sense about what we're going to be doing this month here at the University for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Tomorrow, if you're on campus, there's a password strength contest. We're going to have exercises on campus next week. So here are a couple locations. If you're on the campus, you could join us. Movie nights, some social media competitions. All of this is posted online, so if you need a refresher later. But please join us throughout the month as we celebrate cybersecurity awareness. Next slide, please. And there are lots of ways to keep in touch with us. So here's a little bit of the spaces where you can go and reach out to us. The assets from today, videos from today will be posted later, and we encourage the constant conversation with you. There is a Slack channel and a lobby, so that's another great place to continue the conversation.